Hey guys, welcome back to the channel and thanks for being here. So today I'm back in my lovely little mini truck, which I am very proud of. I couldn't make up my mind whether I wanted to drop this thing, but you know what, I'm just gonna do it, but I'm gonna do it in a way that where I can reverse the procedure. So we're gonna be using lowering blocks and we're gonna wind down the torsion bars in the front, and then we're gonna see what this thing looks like. What I'm gonna do is do one side first because I've never done this before, and once I've got my eye in, I'll show you how I do the other side. All right, so let's go. Let's begin. So one side's out. Now, I told you I've never done this before, and here's proof. I've already undone this bolt over here that holds all of the leaves out, and I've taken several of these leaves out, mostly to soften the suspension because while most of you have 3 or 4 leaves, check this out. I've got all of these. Yes, I think this truck was set up to do some pretty heavy duties. It was a farm truck, so it explains why all of these leaves are in here. I do believe these leaves are 1-ton leaves, which makes sense because I have carried a ton of gravel in this truck in the past. But for me, that is no longer required, and before I can finish that end, I've got to undo this end because they are joined together by the axle. Silly me. Here I was thinking I was going to do one side at a time, but off we go. So before I did anything, the first step I did was soak everything in WD-40. So that's that bolt, all of the bolts underneath here as well, the shock, the strut bolt over there. So everything's soaking in WD-40, and before I do anything, I'm just going to clear these off. They've been underneath the car, obviously, getting all crud and everything on them, so I'm just going to clear the threads. There we go, that's all the threads nicely cleaned up. Alright, that's loose. I'll loosen this spring. Okay, so really now, the only thing you've got to do is undo this shock over here. So there's a bolt, here is the bolt, nice and easy. So I do believe that's a 17. If you've got a ratchet gun, it comes in handy. And there you go. Make short work of it. Just take your shock absorber off. Move it out of the way. I always like to put the nuts back so that I don't have to keep an eye on them, but there you go, that's now loose. So the next phase will be to undo these bolts under here. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. So these are 17s as well. I'm just going to loosen these up for the moment. Now, some people go with a monoleaf, they just keep that one and the overrider. Look, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 leaves in here. Again, I do believe these are 1-ton leaves, which I no longer need. This is now a recreational little sports truck, so it ain't carrying a ton of gravel anymore. And if it is, you know, these can be put back. So the next stage will be to loosen these up so that I can take some of these leaves out. Now what I've decided to do was obviously keep the top one. I'm also going to keep this longer overrider, and I'm also going to keep the leaf that contains this cradle and this bracket. Now this cradle and this bracket is joined to just one of these leaves, and that is this third one here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is keep the top one, the third one, and this overrider. This will go, these two will go, and this one sandwiched in the middle, that'll go too. So I'll have 1, 2, 3 when I put this back together. So to do that, the first thing I need to do is loosen this bracket because it's holding all of these leaves together. And I've just found a real quick and easy way to do that, and I'm going to show that to you now. So just watch your handbrake cable here. You don't want to nick this obviously, but grab yourself a chisel, okay, you jam it in there, and then once you've got that jammed underneath there, get a hammer and just whack it in there. Alright, so now that that chisel is in there, just wedged in there like so, I can push this up and out of the way. Okay? Just like that. And there you go. So that's nice and loose now. So do the same on this side obviously, and the same up here. These don't do anything other than hold these leaves together. And if you go monoleaf, obviously you don't need this anymore, but because I'm going to sandwich a couple of leaves together, I'm going to keep these and bang them back in place when I'm done. All right, so there we go. So these are now free. These are loose. All right, all these leaves are now independent of each other. So it's time to undo the 4 bolts under here. Again, 17 millimeter. Okay, so that's all the bolts out. Just move those out of the way. And now this cradle should be free. Take the U-bolts off. 1, 2, and now your bump stop will be loose as well, so just remove that so it doesn't fall off. All right, so at this stage the only thing holding all of these leaves in is this little bolt over here. So because I've soaked it in penetrant fluid, I'm pretty sure I'm going to be able to loosen this up. Let's give it a crack. So I've got a 14 here. There it goes. When you drop this bolt, all of this will basically come free. So what I would do is, if I were you, is just get this as loose without it falling off, like right about there. And at this point, you'll be able to feel that all of these springs are ready to come out. Now, when they do, they will fall downward. So just watch your hands and feel the weight. Make sure that you can support the weight when that bolt drops out, and if you're not confident in holding all these springs up, get them clamped together with some vice grips here, and when you drop this bolt out, these will stay in place, or here even. But I'm fairly confident that I'll be able to catch these, so I'm just going to drop that bolt and really carefully. So here we go. I'm just going to put my hand there and get this bolt undone. Okay, just holding it with my hand. Okay, there it goes. So now all of these springs are free and they're coming off the bolt. All right, so I'm just going to lay these on the floor, just like that. So as you can see, besides this top leaf over here, I've got one overrider, I've got another overrider, then I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 extra springs. Now, what I've decided to do is get rid of this. I'll keep this one. I'll get rid of this one. I'll keep this one, and the reason I'm keeping this one again is because this is the one that has the brackets on the end. So this will help me re-secure my handbrake cable, and it gives me this bracket to clamp the 2 leaves back together. So I'm keeping this overrider, I'm keeping this one, and those ones are going as well. So these are the ones we need to put back on to this monoleaf. Now, the one thing you'll encounter, like I have, is that this bolt only has threads up until a certain point because it's holding, you know, this absolute multitude of different leaves together, and they only needed threads up until there. But now that I'm only holding 1, 2, 3 leaves, it's actually going to stop there. I'll show it to you on the other side. So here they are on the other side, and as you can see, when I've got this bolt done up all the way, I've got this gap left over. So what I need to do is find me a bolt that will replace this, that has threads all the way along, so that I can get these tightened back up. Now, you're going to want a high tensile bolt and one that fits in this hole. So the first thing to do is jack up this axle and take this bolt out. Now, when you've got this bolt out, you'll be able to see what thread pitch it is, how long it needs to be, how wide, what the diameter needs to be able to replace it with something that's got threads all the way along here. See that? Threads down there, no threads in there, which doesn't work for us. And now I'm going to jack up this rear axle over here to have it lift off the spring. Okay, so it's going to want to tilt forward. So find something to support the front. Okay, there we go, it's loose. So at this point, I'm just going to take a couple of jack stands and get these ready to support the rear axle, basically. Now, what you're going to want to do is measure the distance that the height of your lowering blocks are. So in my case, 11 centimeters, so that's 110 mil. So that's the distance you want to raise this axle by. So at the moment, we've got 80 mil, so we need to go up a little bit more. So that's 100, a little bit more. Okay, I think that's gonna do it. Yeah, 120. Okay, so at this point, we're gonna chock up this side of the axle. Just like that. I'm just gonna drop this a little bit. Okay, so now I know that this jack stand is holding this axle on this side, so that should be fine. I tell you what, at this point, what might be easier is to get this one to the same height, just like that, and get it ready over here. Just straighten out the back so that there isn't a lot of pressure on your drive shaft. Okay, cool. So now your rear axle is on jack stand. So now you've got room to work with. So your lowering block is going to go in there. But before you do that, you need to take this bolt out. So I'm just going to undo it. I'm going to take these leaves off. And now I can take this bolt out. So for me, this bolt, this section over here without threads is too long. So I need to go and find myself some other bolts. So I'm going to head off to the hardware store and find replacements for these. Make sure whatever you get is high tensile steel. Off we go to the hardware store. I'm back. All right, so let me show you what is going on here. So this is the original bolt. Now, what happens is this rounded side goes in here. Now, if you can have a look at this, this sits in there and keeps the lowering block in position. Now, this is a little bit loose, so there's a bit of a blessing in disguise. These are the new high tensile bolts, and they are the same diameter as the originals. They are just threaded all the way along. Now this hex head does not fit into this hole. So you've got two options. One, you can use a Dremel to basically increase the diameter of this hole a little bit. But I actually think that what I'm going to do is round off this head, and luckily enough for me, can you see that circular pattern just inside the hex head? So just in there, see how there's a circle running all the way along? I'm willing to bet that that circle is exactly the diameter I need for this bolt head to sit firmly inside this lowering block. So while this one would be loose if I installed the original bolts, this one will be nice and tight, and all I've got to do is round this off a little bit with a grinder. So that's what I'm going to do. I'll be grinding this down. So let's get to that. So all you've got to do now is feed this bolt through there, like so. Have your nut ready. So that's just in there loose for the moment, but there we go. So we've got 2 leaves and the overrider. I'm just gonna try and tighten this up. Might need to put some vice grips on this, but let's give it a crack. Let's see what happens. Oh, no problem. Oh, by the way, there's another reason why these exist. I've just worked it out. Can you think why? Can you think why? Not only does it hold this leaf to this leaf, but if this nut falls out, you're gonna lose your overrider. That's guaranteed. But if this isn't locked together, you're also gonna lose this leaf, and these will make sure that this bottom leaf doesn't go anywhere if you lose this bolt. It's actually quite clever, isn't it? Okay, the other side is now done as well, nice and tight. But the next thing we've got to do is get the block in there. Time for the U-bolts. These are of course also high tensile. Cradle goes on from the bottom. So I've got the U-bolts in, the lowering blocks are in, the nuts are wound all the way up, including with the washers. So everything's sitting in its perch and in its hole. I've got the diff a little bit loose, just so that I can do the other side. So I've got some slack in here so that I can put the other one in, and then we just got to tighten everything back up. So let me quickly do the other side. Okay, so the other side is done, and at this point it's time to tighten everything back up. So all the little bolts that we've taken off, we've got to put back in, including the shocks, the handbrake cable, and we've got to tighten up the bolts for the lowering blocks. So just underneath here, as you can see, here they are. They're snugged up at the moment, but we're obviously going to have to tighten these a lot more and torque them down. Now those threads are way too long for me to get a socket on there, so we're going to chop them off with a grinder. But before I do that, I'm just going to go over here and get a couple of these bolts done. First I'll reattach this handbrake cable, and of course I've still got my perch. I've reused one of the leaves that had the perch on it, so we're just going to attach that here. There we go. And put the spring back on. Okay. And of course, don't forget your shock absorber. Super important, don't forget your shock absorber. These shocks aren't leaking, they're looking pretty good. So I'm just going to leave them be for now. Alrighty, so now that the handbrake cable is reattached and so is the shock absorber just there, it's time to get to these U-bolts. Now, if you look at the other side, I've already cut those down. So I'm just going to do the same thing here. Alright, so at this point, grab your long socket. In my case, you need a 19. And let's tighten these puppies up. Those are pretty tight, but we're going to crack out the torque wrench and torque these things down. So you're going to want 70 Newton meters for these, and that goes for the bolt that holds the shock on, as well as the bolt, the U-bolts. 70. Few little touch-ups where I accidentally hacked up the cradle, and I'll get the end of these nuts too. So that's kind of it for the back, guys. Both sides done. Let's put the wheels on and see what the ride height's like. Can't wait to drop this thing down and see where we're at. I'm not sure if it'll get to the fender, but we're about to find out. Okay, where's my ratchet gun? Seriously, where's my ratchet gun? Oh, there it is. Let's see what we've got. I've got my fingers crossed here that this was all worth it. Of course it's worth it. We get to work on these cool little mini trucks. 100% worth it. Did this give me the ride height I wanted though? That's the question. Right, here we go. Yes, it certainly did. Oh man, loving that. That's sick. So I gotta say, I'm pretty happy with that. I wouldn't actually want it any lower. It is just perfect for me. I still got a little bit of a gap here, say 2 fingers, 2.5, and that's perfect in case I ever want to carry stuff around in this tub. And it gives me a little bit of suspension travel. The clearance underneath is still pretty good. So yeah, pretty stoked about this. Now, the rear is done, and honestly, that's 90% of the work. Let's do the fronts. And with the fronts, it's quite simple, really. You've got torsion bars, so we just need to wind them down. So let's go do that real quick. All you really need is a 17mm socket and a wrench. You don't even need to lift the front of the vehicle up. If you're raising it, you probably want to take the tension off the front torsion bars, so you do want to put it on jack stands. But if you're lowering it, gravity is actually going to help you. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to measure the distance here and on the other side with a tape measure, and I'll basically drop both of these the same amount. So at the moment we've got 77 centimeters or 30 inches and a quarter. So really all you've got to do now is do some wrenching. This is it. So right underneath here, the front door, you will find the end of the torsion bar. That is the world's longest bolt. What we got there? 67, 67. Let's take this outside and take a proper look. Keeps bleeding from the words I spit, so sharp, so freezing, so cold. Behold, frostbite, they feeling. I could tear you apart, or I could go heal them. Don't believe in fate, don't believe in ceilings. I just need a taste, and my mind starts peeling. I don't pace myself, I grind on kneeling. Got lust for change, I just love the feeling. I ain't gonna give up, got too little time. So there it is, guys, one lowered little budget mini truck. Now, do I like the results? I like the look of it, but there's definitely some positives and some negatives. The positives is I like the stance of this thing now. Maybe I could go a smidge lower, and then I'd be perfectly happy. But I'm talking millimeters, you know, maybe 10 mil or so. But there is one big drawback, and that is this, the ride. I don't know if you can tell, but this thing definitely shakes and rattles a little bit more than it used to. Now, it's not the end of the world, but I'm pretty sure that this thing is sitting on its bump stops. Yep, definitely on the bump stops. And for me, that's just not gonna do. So I do know that there's a few little tricks that will give me some more suspension travel. One of them being flipping the ball joints, and I do want to do a how-to video pretty soon on swapping ball joints on this car. So when that video comes, I am going to look at the ride height again, and hopefully that'll give me another inch or so of suspension travel, because right now I've got none. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to shave the bump stops. Now, I'm not going to take the bump stops out completely, because quite frankly I'm not very keen on banging frame. But I mean, they're quite tall, they're like this tall. If I can trim them down to this tall, I think that gives me another inch there as well. So if I can trim the rears an inch and trim the front bump stops an inch, and then flip the ball joints, which gives me another inch, that gives me about an inch in the back extra and 2 inches extra in the front, and that's plenty. That should be fine. But yeah, all in all, that would be my only gripe. I'm definitely on the bump stops here, so I'm going to fix that in the future. But am I raising the truck back up? No, I definitely am not. You know, I've got a few project cars, and every time I get in this thing, I just grin from ear to ear. This thing is just a hoot to drive. These are awesome little trucks. They're never going to win any races, of course, but man, they're fun. They're fun. So that's all I've got for you today. I hope you liked this video, and if you did, give it a like, give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, subscribe. You know, this is a budget mini truck build, and I hope you like this series. And if you do, hit the subscribe button, click the bell so that you'll be notified when more videos come out on this truck. That's enough chit chat from me. I hope you liked what you saw, and if you did, go ahead and try this on your car.
Hope you're ready for a demon.